This whole previous season, Russell Westbrook was going Terminator mode when it came to doing pretty much everything for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And all of us just wanted the guy to have a second star. And it's finally happened. Paul George was robbed from the Indiana Pacers. And now Westbrook's got his second guy, at least for one season. Who knows if he's going to leave to OKC, or to the Lakers, I should say. I don't want to spend too much time talking about these two because, the story kind of tells itself. Here's what I'll say. I think Paul George is like the perfect star to be under Westbrook because he's great off the ball, very athletic, can cut to the rim, good shooter, great shooter, really. Awesome from mid-range, can come around screens, great in transition, and a good enough ball handler to where when Westbrook is not in the game, or just when Westbrook is in the game but you want to get a bit more dynamic, Paul George can run the offense himself. And I think these two together are going to be great. I want to see how they stack up with the rest of the Western Conference, but we also have to talk about the rest of the roster, one of which is Andre Robertson. They don't have all the money in the world to play with, but if they time it right, they could get someone for their mid-level and re-sign Robertson with bird rights. And I think when you look at the rest of the West, they're going to need Robertson's defense and athleticism. Now, the outside shot is still a problem, but the one thing I would say is the acquisition of Paul George makes it to where Robertson can kind of chill offensively a little bit more and not be someone that the defense can just leave completely wide open. But it's still not ideal. The one thing I have, though, I want to ask is any other wing player really going to step up for them? Is Jeremy Grant, who has a ridiculous contest against Drew Holiday that makes no sense, can he be a quality two-way player for them? Can Doug McDermott be a reliable outside shooter who can come off the bench and just provide some spacing for Paul George as well as Russell Westbrook, even if he's not going to be starting for them? Defensively, I wouldn't ask much of the guy, but you need guys who can knock down some shots. Same thing with Alex Abrinas. I would say he's a very similar player to Doug McDermott, someone who can be an outside shooter. I think McDermott has a little more potential to play the small ball four. I don't really see that in Abrinas, but that's okay. Speaking of the four, what do they do with Taj Gibson? They could re-sign him, but if you have Robertson and Gibson, the spacing around Westbrook and Paul George really isn't that great, and I think it could hinder your offense. So I could see a world where they let Gibson go, and then they could use their mid-level on someone like an Ersan Ilyasova, who, ironically, they had before, because he's an outside shooter who could provide a lot of spacing. The one question is, though, like I said, if you want to re-sign Robertson and use your mid-level, the timing has to be pretty precise here. Like, you may have to use the mid-level first and then re-sign Robertson. Another one's Patrick Patterson, who I mention all the time. You just got to get 1-4 who can stretch the floor as well as play some defense. Maybe you can do it in a trade some way that I'm just not seeing. So if you were able to get a decent defensive four on top of Steven Adams, Paul George, Robertson, could still be a really awesome defensive team. Now let's talk about how they stack up against the rest of the Western Conference, and I feel like beginning with the new look Houston Rockets. A lot of offensive firepower, man. The acquisition of Chris Paul, I've already said, I don't know if it's going to be a day one seamless fit between him and James Harden, but I do think they're going to figure it out, and I think it's going to be very scary. This is immediately why you need Andre Robertson on this team, because you're going to need someone who you can put on Chris Paul or James Harden, and he actually has a chance to survive defending those dudes one-on-one. No one's going to stop them from doing what they want to do, but he could at least make their days a little tougher, and at times, Paul George can defend the other guy, so you have two top-tier defenders that you're going to need against these two. And then if we're looking at Houston, I still think the Rockets really need another wing defender because Ariza's cool, but he's really all they have. And that could pose a problem against a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder. There's still the black hole on defense of Ryan Anderson. He could do all he wants to try to hide defensively. When you have a ball handler like Westbrook, he's going to find a way to just kill Ryan Anderson in pick and rolls. And then the addition of Paul George, is that enough shot making, him as well as Russell Westbrook, to where you can match when Houston goes on crazy flurries of three-pointers or Chris Paul never missing from mid-range or whatever? But of course there are concerns for the Thunder. This is a common theme, Roberson's offense. This stuff comes out in the playoffs, man. Hopefully it doesn't kill you too much. I also think Chris Paul, still one of the best defensive players in the NBA, they'll have a chance on Westbrook. Sure, Russ is going to drive by him sometimes, but I think CP3 could make it interesting. That would be a fun series. I don't know if Chris Paul and James Harden might just be too damn difficult to deal with, but it would be fun nonetheless. If we can talk about San Antonio, if Patty Mills is ever defending Westbrook, that's an immediate 2 points. But the Spurs are smart. Danny Green would be defending Westbrook pretty much all the time. And Green, second team all defense, I believe it was, and that is deserving. And Robertson would be the guy that you would put a Patty Mills or a Tony Parker on. We should mention him. So the Spurs are going to know how to... I mean, they're San Antonio. They know how to do stuff. And then there's also the Kawhi Leonard factor. Would he shut down Paul George? I mean, it depends on what you mean by shut down. Is PG going to go for 35 points every game against San Antonio? Probably not. And on the flip side of things, what if Kawhi just goes off himself and has crazy point totals? And I mean, he might win the MVP next season. Of course, Paul George is a damn good defender in his own right as well, so I don't think Kawhi Leonard could just do whatever he wants out there. But I mean, we saw the impact he made in the playoffs. Like, he was kicking the Warriors' ass in Game 1 before he got hurt. He was ridiculous against the Grizzlies, specifically in that one game where he wouldn't freaking miss. But there are questions for the Spurs. Do they have a number 2 guy? Because they were asking LaMarcus Aldridge to do a lot in this postseason with Kawhi Leonard before he was injured. And there were moments when he just, the turnaround jumper wouldn't go in. He couldn't make a hook shot. And you're like, well, this guy, he's not a guy that you can ask to be a big-time scorer for you. Pau Gasol is still on this team. Similar to Ryan Anderson, he's a huge black hole. Steven Adams could eat him alive in pick and rolls, transition. And that's been a problem for the Spurs in the past, is their lack of athleticism up front. And that could be the difference in a series, is that OKC just may be too damn athletic. One interesting thing will be what they do with their $13 million in cap space. They need another wing defender. Maybe you bring back Jonathan Simmons. Maybe you sign Andre freaking Iguodala, which would really be interesting for a type of series. Now we can talk about the big bad Golden State Warriors. It's a pretty tall task to go up against these guys. You need yourself quite a few two-way players, some great shot-making abilities, and a few things to go your way. And even then it might still not be enough because, I mean, you just have to be on another level to compete with these guys. And I don't know if OKC can be there. They have some chances. Once again, Andre Robertson, he's a very polarizing player. Defensively, he can hang around with Golden State and be someone who you're comfortable with on that side of the floor. And Paul George, I would say the same thing about. I mean, having these two guys who are really athletic and really strong on defense, it's a great thing to have. And you're going to need that against the Warriors. And perhaps Westbrook could just go nuts with 35, 40-point games, because he does have that in him, of course. And perhaps Paul George... I mean, I would say Billy Donovan's grown into a pretty good head coach. Maybe he has some sort of game plan that could take Paul George to another level for a team like the Warriors. And Steven Adams is the ideal type of big man if you want to go against the Warriors. But this is the type of thing that you need to see first. You know, if OKC surprises us and they're even better than we suspect they may be, but I'm not going to go saying they can beat the Warriors. Can we talk about the T-Wolves in this? I mean, maybe at this point with the moves they're making, Karl Anthony Towns might explode and be like the fourth best player in the NBA this season. I think that's on the table. And then Jimmy Butler being the primary ball handler for them and everything he can do. But one thing I'm interested in is Jeff Teague ready to be the point guard for Jimmy Butler? Because he's not going to have the ball in his hands all the time. And if there's any moments when Teague is on Westbrook, similar to Patty Mills, you can pretty much just put 2 points up on the board. So I think this series, as well as the Western Conference playoffs are just going to be awesome this season. This would be really fun. I think a big thing would be who plays better between Paul George and Jimmy Butler. These are two of the better two-way players in the NBA. They drew a lot of comparisons to each other this season, and it would just depend on, can Butler score on George? Can Paul George defend Jimmy Butler? Can Butler defend George? You get it. I feel like I was repeating myself there, but whatever. It would be cool. It'd be pretty fun. I still have some fears about the T-Wolves' overall fit, but the talent is there nonetheless. A lot of this is going to come down to the power forward, because Enes Kanter cannot be your 4, because he's one of the worst defensive players in the league. If you can get that two-way power forward, I think it unlocks a lot of things for OKC. But this is big, man. I mean, 2 of the top players in the league on the same team, which has been a theme for the postseason, at least in the Western Conference. The West is shaping up to be pretty damn fun next season.